1-800-585-9396. That's 1-800-585-9396. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985. You can also send an email to openline@EWTN.com.
Our pro-life warrior Barbara McGuigan is in the house for another Tuesday edition of EWTN's Open Line. If you've got a question for Barbara, if you've got something you'd like to share with us, the number's 1-800-585-9396. That's toll-free anywhere in North America. 1-800-585-9396. If you're outside the United States and Canada, if you're part of McGuigan's European throng, call us at 1-205-271-2985. That's 1-205-271-2985, and we'll put you straight to the front of the line. Or you can send us an email, openline@EWTN.com. You can now text your questions to Barbara. Text the letters EWTN to 55000. Wait for a response. Follow those instructions. Message and data rates may apply. I'm Jack Williams, the lovely and talented Michael McCall producing the program again today. And your call screener is Mr. Rich Jesse. Our host, as she is every Tuesday, is the indescribable, uncomprehendable, incomparable Barbara McGuigan. Barbara, how are you?
Oh, my goodness, you crack me up. I am really fine, as they say, too blessed to be stressed.
There you go.
Just trying to keep it cool with this election. Just trying to keep it cool.
Well, just, yeah.
We all are.
The political process and my blood pressure don't work well together sometimes.
Isn't it the truth, Jack? I so hear you.
Couple lines open, 1-800-585-9396. Jump in, please. We've got an email from Catherine, and she says, Barbara, I hope you don't mind. I have a prayer request. I have an aunt in a nursing home whose son, my cousin, either has signed or is about to sign a paper to stop feeding his mom. My dad, her brother, is angry, and so are the other surviving siblings, yet they can't do anything about it because her son, my cousin, has power of attorney. Can you pray for my aunt in this situation? To my favorite pro-life person, thank you so much. Can you ask your pro-life warriors to pray for this, too? Once again, thank you. I love Barbara McGuigan.
No.
It's on there. I only read what's put in front of me, Barbara.
Oh, my goodness. Well, thanks be to God. All glory to God, of course. So let me answer Catherine real quick. And I don't know, the sound, I could barely hear you, Jack. It kept breaking up, so I don't know if I'm having a problem here. But also my server is down to get assistant producer, just so you know. So I'm going to keep trying to get back on assistant producer. Okay, so dear and good Catherine, I'm so sorry your family must deal with such sadness. Having said that, I also know that God's grace is sufficient. He will get you all through it. I'm wondering if your dad could intervene, not totally by himself, I don't think, but with his siblings, as far as trying to influence their nephew who has the power of attorney. If your cousin was raised in the Catholic faith, I don't know how old he is. There are many questions that I would have. He might need to learn once again why euthanasia and assisted suicide is wrong in this case. I mean, there are other things, of course, too, other life attacks. But it takes great courage to go against a culture of death, which dear Mother Angelica called the blackest pit. It's nothing, she said, nothing but darkness. You see, Catherine, Satan is the father of lies, and his goal is to trick us into thinking that killing the innocent is a compassionate and hopeful thing to do if a person is inconvenient or old or even tired of living. You know this. He and his minions prowl about the earth seeking the ruin of souls. If they can't kill us physically, they will do everything in their power to kill us spiritually. And the reason I say that is because a person's spirit has to submit to murder first before they even commit a physical act of murder. Abortion, euthanasia, assisted suicide, to name a few, are spiritual acts of murder first. While praying and fasting, I believe your family needs to band together to show your cousin his responsibility as his mother's legal decision maker. Really, it's only fair to give your cousin 3 simple principles given to us by Jesus in the Catholic Church. They basically come down to 3 duties in regards to these life and death matters. Our first duty is to protect the life and dignity of the sick, weak, poor, and defenseless. Now, most people who promote euthanasia and assisted suicide admit that pain is not the reason for advocating suicide. There are adequate pain protocols or interventions in 90 to 90% of terminally ill patients. Even most of the depression that leads to suicide or to suicide attempts can be treated with current protocols by caring and knowledgeable physicians. To explain how crafty the devil is, instead of focusing on pain and depression, which has always been the case in the past, the Hemlock Society, now called Compassion and Choices, would rather focus on, and this is a quote, they'd rather focus on the indignity of the need for assistance. The indignity of the need for assistance. When a person has never been exposed to the all-sufficiency and uniqueness of Jesus Christ and his teachings, they see no need in giving and receiving love and compassion, the very part of life that makes us human. We all need to be concerned about this, especially the disability rights community, because this line of thinking undermines the dignity of the disabled. Many thousands of people rely on personal assistance. Think about it. Most families do have someone like this. One analyst asks, have we actually gotten to the point that we will advocate for suicides because people need help using the toilet? In other words, if suicide is to be preferred over needing assistance, what does that say about the worth and dignity of disabled people? Principle number 2, our duty to assure that new laws do not impose onerous burdens such as the duty to die on the vulnerable. A law permitting freedom to one group cannot impose an excessive burden on another group, on the vulnerable. We've been warned by physicians and ethicists that the mere option of assisted suicide can put pressure on vulnerable people to request it against their wishes, especially for those who could be persuaded that they or their family or the world would be better off if they were dead. Again, ethicists and directors of palliative care write about how the decisions made by dying patients are seldom autonomous and how easily they are influenced and even manipulated. I would hate to think, Catherine, that your cousin has been a part of this. Removing food and water, or in some cases a feeding tube, but of course, if the body is no longer, the stomach is no longer processing the food, that's a different story. But if you just on general principles are removing these things, aka starving a person to death, is a very painful way to die. If this is the case, your cousin's decision may haunt him forever. I mean, you look at, and Jack, you're going to have to keep me on time here because I don't have a clock.
You're fine.
Okay. Up in Oregon, after they legalized assisted suicide, the physician of Kate Cheney refused to prescribe lethal meds for her because he thought the request was not her free choice, but from her daughter who was tired of caregiving. Think about it. So the daughter went to another physician who sealed the deal. Again, who are the populations most likely to feel pressure to commit assisted suicide? To commit that? Those who feel like a burden to their friends and family, who feel badly about having a weakness or an illness, those who are reversibly depressed because they have been diagnosed with a terminal illness, those with clinical depression, and those with low self-esteem. In other words, a huge segment of American society. And then, of course, you bet your bippy the insurance companies get involved who carry out the mandate of new euthanasia laws. We have them here in California. Again, up in Oregon, a cancer patient named Barbara Wagner, I think we talked about this on Open Line, Jack. She was sent a letter by a company administering the state's insurance plans stating that they would not pay for a drug that would help treat her cancer. But they would pay for her assisted suicide. How sick to think they wouldn't pay for her to live, but they'd pay for her to die. As Mother Angelica said, the culture of death is the blackest pit, nothing but darkness. Last principle, our duty to prevent cultural decline arising out of laws that devalue or degrade human life. This principle, of course, enshrines not only the teaching of Jesus, but also that of St. John Paul, Pope Benedict, and Pope Francis on the culture of life. Why? Because it reconfigures our view of the quality of life, and it legitimizes and normalizes suicide as socially and morally acceptable. Couple more sentences. The Netherlands killing bureaucracy like to keep track of who doctors euthanize in that country and why. No kidding. In 2014, the total, now this is in the Netherlands, was nearly 400 people per month for a total of 5,306 people. And yes, psychiatrists still killed mentally ill patients, 41 according to this report. Wesley Smith, an expert on euthanasia, said, if the USA, now just think about this, if the USA had the same kill rate, it takes time, for a culture to follow and digest euthanasia's hemlock. The total would be 80,000 annually. We're much bigger than the Netherlands. The culture of death grows like a cancer. The Dutch, I'll tell you, Jack, when I read this, it curled my hair. The Dutch now have mobile euthanasia units that will promptly come to a person's home to administer lethal drugs upon request. So, Catherine, if we are anything like Holland, it will cast not only a shadow, but as Mother Angelica said, a black pit, a deep darkness, not lifting us up to the light of Christ, but pulling us down into this black pit. Know that I will keep you and your family in mind, heart, and prayer.
1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. Couple lines open for you right now. Jump on 1-800-585-9396. Open line Tuesday with Barbara McGuigan.
From the Dominican House of Studies, Father Dominic Legg.
Conscience is like a compass guiding us on the right path, and the path we take is important. It leads us either towards our ultimate happiness, finally God, or away from Him. That's why it's important to form your conscience by the teaching of the Church, which was instituted by Christ to be our guide on the path of life. If that's true about our personal lives, it's true about our country too. Voting is a great privilege of being a citizen, and respecting the separation of church and state does not mean that we pretend we're not Christians when we talk about politics, and even less when we step into the voting booth. Our country can only be moral. It will only be on the right path when we have moral citizens who bring their moral choices, the choices guided by their conscience, into the voting booth and the public square to guide our nation towards what is truly good and right.
For a guide to Catholic teaching and voting, visit EWTN.com/vote.
Have you heard about Church Pop? It's the newest member of the EWTN family with new online Christian content that's fun and inspiring every day. Find it on Snapchat, Instagram, and on the web at churchpop.com.
Coming up later today on Cresta in the Afternoon.
We're going to continue our interviews with the award-winning Grammy composer J.J. Wright. He's created O Emmanuel. It's a magnificent setting of sacred music, the O antiphons for Vespers. We're going to listen to part of it. He's going to explain part of it. And we're also going to talk with Jean Bishop about forgiving her sister's killer as the first step to peace.
Cresta in the Afternoon, later today on EWTN Radio.
This is Cardinal Sean O'Malley, Archbishop of Boston, Massachusetts.
This is Marcus Grodi, host of The Journey Home.
Hello, this is Archbishop Joseph Tobin of the Archdiocese of Indianapolis. You're listening to EWTN, the Global Catholic Radio Network.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. If you have a question or comment, call 1-800-585-9396. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985 or send an email to openline@ewtn.com.
Two lines open for you at 1-800-585-9396. Toll free anywhere in North America. 1-800-585-9396. We've got the rest of the hour with our pro-life warrior, Barbara McGuigan. Barbara, you ready to go to the phones?
I sure am.
Pat is in northern Michigan, listening to EWTN on Sirius XM channel 130. Pat, you're on with Barbara.
Hi, Pat.
Hi, Barbara.
How can I help? Sure.
I was a nurse for many years, and we would take and give people medication like morphine or Versed when we take them off vents, and they would slowly let them pass away. Was that considered euthanasia? I worry about that.
Okay, well, Pat, were they in the dying process? Because if you're in the dying process, you don't have to have any extraordinary treatment. You know, any unnatural treatments do not have to be put forth. But to choose suicide and to further legalize it in any given country is a catastrophic mistake. Because first of all, go ahead.
I'm totally against suicide, totally. And I'm totally against assisted suicide, but being in the profession that I was in, it always concerned me, and I didn't know if I assisted with something like this, am I guilty of a mortal sin? Do I need to, It bothered me for years.
Did you withhold food or water?
Oh no, never.
Then you're good.
Oh, well, no, that's the most important fact that we needed to know. Yes, if you're not, but because you see, those are just basic treatments. Food and water. Anybody will die without food and water. So that's basic treatment, of course. So, no, goodness, no. I mean, you really were of the opinion that you were doing the right thing. And if you, like Jack says, if you weren't withholding food and water, you're good to go.
Okay. It's weighed heavy on my mind for years. I've been retired for a few years. It's just really weighed heavy on my mind whether I did something wrong, and I don't want to hurt anybody.
Oh, no, of course. I wish I would have had you as my nurse many times. That's a good thing. Well, God bless you.
I'll take care of you.
Thanks so much. God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you very much.
All righty. Bye-bye now.
1-800-585-9396. Toll free anywhere in North America. 1-800-585-9396. We have a text from John Barbara. He says, how about voting for the best VP in the election if you can't vote for the presidential candidate?
Okay. Here's the thing. I guess I would have to know your reasons why you can't vote for the presidential candidate, because we do have one that, and here's the thing, if you go to usccb.org, that's the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, right? If you go there and you look up the challenge of forming consciences for faithful citizenship, skip part 1, go right to part 2 of 2, which is making moral choices and applying our principles. Okay, this is an important part. Okay, here's the thing. If you ask the question, what public policies should concern Catholics most? Okay, you go to that section, you go to that particular section. And what it says is that as Catholics, we are led to raise questions about political life other than those that concentrate on individual material well-being. In other words, you're asking about the vice president instead of the president, but we can't concentrate in this particular election on a certain individual or material well-being, okay? The bishops say we focus more broadly on what protects or threatens the dignity of every human life. Catholic teaching challenges voters and candidates, citizens and elected officials to consider the moral and ethical dimensions of public policy issues. Again, looking at the platform, not at the people, at the platform. In light of ethical principles, we bishops offer the following policy goals that we hope will guide Catholics as they form their consciences and reflect on the moral dimensions of their public choices. Okay? Number 1, address the preeminent requirement.
What kind of requirement?
Preeminent requirement to protect human life by restricting and bringing to an end the destruction of unborn children through abortion and providing women in crisis pregnancies with the supports they need. End the following practices. Now, abortion's first. Now end this. Of course, the use of euthanasia and assisted suicide to deal with the burdens of illness and disability. The destruction of human embryos in the name of research. We've talked about this plenty of times. The use of the death penalty to combat crime. And the imprudent resort to war to address international disputes. Okay, and then they go on to talk about the fundamental understanding of marriage, to protect marriage as a lifelong and faithful union of one man and one woman. They go on to immigration, they go on to poverty, education, religious freedom, health care, unjust discrimination, in other words, racism or hostility towards immigrants or religious bigotry, and then military force. And then join with others around the world to pursue peace, protect human rights and religious liberty, and advance. See, as far as I'm concerned, this is the bottom line right here. Okay, this is the bottom. And I know that may sound very callous to some because we are Catholics. We want to see virtue and character. Okay? I mean, character is the sum total of the Christian virtues. Okay, but then we have to look at platforms. In this election, they're night and day. The platforms are night and day. And so there again, the bishops come back and say the preeminent requirement is to protect human life. Now, I also was emailed by a listener, Citizens for a Pro-Life Society. Jack, I think you know about this. Isn't that Monica's group?
Monica Miller, Dr. Monica Miller?
Yeah, Monica Miller, Citizens for a Pro-Life Society. This is a flyer that you can actually print off. And what the flyer is, respect for life, is the preeminent political issue. Obviously, they read the usccb.org and went on the website. But it's a flyer. It's actually a flyer that we could all pass out in our churches that you can just print off. And what they're saying is when any group of people is declared non-persons under the law, any group, the rights of all human beings, all of us, are potentially at risk. And then it gives you 7 reasons. Maybe throughout the show we can go on and talk about these 7 reasons because they're incredible.
Preeminent. Our word for the day.
Yes.
Preeminent.
That's it.
You know, if I can quote Father Stephen Imperato, who's been here at the network for the last couple of weeks,
he's great.
From Priests for Life, and he talks about that he has voted in decades worth of elections in local to national races in all parts of the United States. And he has never, ever voted in an election where there was not a clear-cut choice on the issue of life between the two candidates.
That's it. That's it.
1-800.
This is it.
Go ahead. 1-800.
No.
1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. 1-800-585-9396. Rachel in Fredericksburg, Maryland, hold on. You're up next. We'll also talk to Maria, Peggy, Paul, and hopefully you. 1-800-585-9396. Open Line Tuesday with Barbara McGuigan.
EWTN News Nightly in Washington, D.C., I'm Brian Patrick with your EWTN News Link. Pope Francis presses his call for Christians to forge greater unity. He celebrated Mass this morning for the Solemnity of All Saints with Sweden's tiny Catholic community before returning to the Vatican. An Iraqi general says special forces entered the outskirts of Mosul today. They took the state television building in the face of fierce resistance from Islamic State fighters. It's the first time Iraqi troops have entered Iraq's second largest city in more than 2 years. Central Italy gets no respite from earthquake aftershocks. Thousands are homeless and frightened after a massive weekend tremor razed centuries-old town. Cemeteries are heavily damaged with coffins spilling out of their crypts. And Turkey's prime minister shrugs off the European Union's criticism of media freedoms. The rebuke follows the detentions of at least 13 senior staff members of an opposition Turkish newspaper. Watch EWTN News Nightly tonight.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
I vote for life because it's an abomination to God. The culture of death. I cannot vote for death. I vote for life. I vote for the God who gave us life and has a right. The only one who has a right to create life and call it forth to himself. The only one. You don't have a right. I don't have a right. Nobody has a right to call death upon someone God has called to life. If we don't stand for the principles of God, you will be next. The culture of death is hard, unbending. It is without love, without compassion, without hope. It's the blackest pit. I cannot vote for that.
For a guide to Catholic teaching and voting, visit EWTN.com/vote.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. If you have a question or comment, call 1-800-585-9396. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985 or send an email to openline@EWTN.com.
Be sure to keep it right here on many of these EWTN affiliated radio stations. As soon as we're finished, Cresta in the afternoon, outtakes to the airwaves here at 4 o'clock Eastern for 2 hours of great and inspiring Catholic conversation. Again, 4 Eastern right here on EWTN Cresta in the afternoon. Barbara, you had something else you wanted to say on the subject?
You know, I just have a PS so people understand the importance, and I know our listeners do. I mean, you know, I hope there's someone who's listening for the first time maybe, but the family is basically meant by God to be the sanctuary of life. That's what St. John Paul the Great talked about, where all life is welcomed and accepted and loved and taken care of in sickness. Anyone who is opposed to this, anyone who systematically tries to prevent this, is not of God. And this is what we need to look at, and this is precisely why the bishops talk about life being the preeminent political issue, especially in this election. We've never had such a pro-life platform to choose from like we have this year. Right, Jack?
Yes, ma'am. Next up is Rachel in Fredericksburg, Maryland, listening to Guadalupe Radio. Rachel, you're on with Barbara McGuigan.
Hi, Rachel.
Good afternoon. I'd like to ask, what are the actual symptoms that a person's body is finally rejecting nutrition and hydration? I know that, you know, a person's, if their bladder, their kidneys shut down, they wouldn't be eliminating fluid. They could get edema and, you know, that kind of thing.
You know, the body, this is what I was told a while ago. The body can just seem to kind of fill up with water. It kind of, the edema that you're talking about is very evident. And sometimes I was told that even the water can come through the pores of the skin. So that would be an indication that the feeding tube or food and water, whatever, is not being assimilated. It's not being processed. The stomach is trying to close down. Does that make sense? That's what I was told.
Yeah, but that's my neighbor's case. That's not happening. Her grandfather is in Baltimore. He's still eliminating more than 1.5 liters into a catheter, and his you know, kidney, like the enzymes are still good. He's 78 years old. He has dementia, and there's a blockage in his rectum. So they attempted a couple of procedures that didn't work, and they just don't think it's right to do complete big abdominal surgery.
Oh.
He gets bed sores. He's in, very poor condition. So they don't feel like surgery is the right thing.
Yes,
But
well, see, that
when they give him sips of water, when they give him sips of, a supplement, he laps it up.
Oh, gosh.
He's
so
so
you've got
hungry.
to,
and yet all the family is putting pressure on the granddaughter because she has the medical power of attorney. They want her to remove food and water, yet he laps it up when they give him something to drink.
Okay, then that means he still needs it and he still wants it. And so I think I would just go along. As far as the surgery, I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I think that in this case that could possibly be considered extraordinary treatment to put him through a surgery. The goal is to keep the person comfortable. To keep the person pain-free, 90 to 95% of the time they can do this. And if that sometimes requires extra morphine that, would be too much, right, for the person, then that's a different story because they want to keep the person out of pain. That is really the goal. But the fact that he still wants the liquids, I would say continue. Sometimes, like with my dad, he wasn't on any kind of feeding tube or anything like that, but we had those little sticks that they are like kind of like a popsicle, but not really, and they moisten the lips and everything so the lips don't crack, and that can become painful as well. So I would talk to your pastor, see what he has to say on this, because the fact that he still wants it. See, a lot of times if you're in the dying process, you don't want food. That's the last thing you want is food. This has been in my experience, and with some of my friends too, with their parents. They just would get upset when somebody tried to give them even Jell-O. They just did not want to take any food. So again, there you are causing another situation for them that might not be necessary. So I would just think that and if anyone's out there that wants to call in and give your opinion on this, we would appreciate that, wouldn't we, Jack?
We would. Thanks, Rachel, so much. We will keep you in our prayers for sure. Next up is Pamela in Piedmont, South Dakota, listening on Rio Presence Radio. Pamela, you're on with Barbara McGuigan.
Hi, Pamela.
Hi. Well, just a little bit ago, there was a retired nurse that spoke of administering. I thought she said administering pain medication to dying patients, and was dealing with some guilt that she may have done something wrong. If I heard that right, she was told that that if she didn't withhold food or water, she had done nothing wrong. And I know there are some hospitals and hospices who have given overdoses of pain meds for the purpose of hastening death, and that obviously would be an immoral act. So maybe I misunderstood her.
Well, I think the thing she was really upset about was having taken some patients off of a ventilator.
Okay.
Giving pain medication, though, was the person in pain. That's the main thing, was the person in pain.
Right, but I know that there's hospices and nurses who have been accused in hospitals of killing patients by overdosing them with large amounts of pain med. And it wasn't just to keep them, their pain levels down.
Just to get them out the door.
It was to hasten death.
Yeah, no, well, that's not right. That's not good. And it's a shame when they just don't know these protocols. I mean, we're not asking for any extraordinary measures, any unnatural measures. That's not the point. But the point, and like St. John Paul said, to forego extraordinary or disproportionate means is not the equivalent of suicide or euthanasia. It rather expresses acceptance of the human condition in the face of death. That's St. John Paul the Great. So they're not expected to, tough it out and be martyrs, really. That's why the point is to keep them comfortable. Food and water will, like the gentleman before. I mean, if he's really wanting this liquid, my goodness, that's part of keeping him comfortable. So Yeah, it's too bad. There are some great things written on this. I don't have who put this out. I'm pretty sure it's Dr. Cariotti, Aaron Cariotti. I'm going to find this out because I printed off all his pages, but it didn't have his name on it or anything. But I'm going to get to the bottom of it, and he explains, he's a psychiatrist here in Southern California, and he explains this whole thing very, very, very well. So I'll let you know about that next week. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
God bless you.
Thanks, Pamela. Appreciate the phone call. 1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. Next up is Maria in Great Falls, Missouri. She's listening on Sirius XM Channel 130. Maria, you're on with Barbara McGuigan.
Hi, Maria.
Hi, Barbara. Hi. I was hoping you could talk a little bit about the abortion situation throughout Europe. When I've interacted with Europeans, more specifically English, they tell me that a lot of the freedom of access to abortion is one of the things that keeps their abortion rates down, in addition to their education being very, like, in their normal schools, there's a lot of sex ed and stuff. So kids are using, people are more understanding of what their body does, and so then they're having fewer needs for abortions because of the education and the accessibility of it. And I don't know, like in an apologetic way, how to respond to that.
You're talking about sex education that they get in Europe? It's totally Planned Parenthood type sex education, where, just give them all the information you possibly can, all the details, and then also teach them that contraception is a good thing.
Did she document any of these claims, Maria?
No.
Yeah, see, there's an industry term for the notion that education and birth control prevent abortion, and that term is hooey.
I thought you were going to use a big long word.
No.
Hooey.
No.
There you go. I'll tell you something. Being in the pro-life chastity environment for many, many years, I know full well that the minute you step up the idea of contraception, you step up unintended pregnancies. And when you step up unintended pregnancies, you step up abortion. And that's a fact. Now, I'm not saying that if they're seniors in high school, they can never be taught how birth control pills work. It's in the light in which you teach it. If you teach it as a good thing, I mean, what's that going to do? But if you really teach the truth about all the consequences of every type of birth control, pretty much, then they're getting the truth. They need the full truth is what it is. But the Planned Parenthood type of sex ed is one-sided, trust me.
So what is the situation in Europe with abortion? What is their rates of abortion? Are we better than them, worse than them, comparing Europe to America?
I can't really give you that off the top of my head. I would have to look it up. But, and I've only spoken in the English-speaking countries. So, their abortion rates were always high. But they're smaller. They're smaller countries. So, I mean, we top a lot of things. Just like I said in the beginning about the fact that if we have the same kill rate, right, as the Netherlands, we'll be up to 80,000 people. They were up to 5,200 and something, whatever it was. But we would be at an 80,000 people being euthanized or committing assisted suicide every year. I mean, oh my goodness. Mother Angelica hits it on the head when she says this is a pit, a black pit. And the minute a culture embraces this, and they want to prevent life, they're opposed to life, they systematically try to prevent it, you've got some big problems. So, on Saturday, I'd like to give a pitch for the good fight because I have Monsignor Charles Pope coming on. We're going to talk for an hour about how to vote as a Catholic with the Catholic Moral Vision. And then Michael Warsaw, the CEO and chairman of the board of EWTN, is going to jump on for about 15 minutes. And then we have an Opus Dei priest, Father Luke Mata, is coming on to talk about our citizenship and what voting means to us. So anyway, just to give a little pitch for that, thanks for letting me do it, Jack.
If you've got a smartphone or a tablet, you can now carry EWTN with you everywhere. You can enjoy EWTN live TV and radio streams with audio and video on demand. EWTN News is available, program schedules, prayers, and devotionals. It's included free is the full RSV Catholic Edition Bible and Gospel of Mark audio from the Truth and Life New Testament Audio Bible. You can download that EWTN app for free at EWTN.com/mobile. That's EWTN.com/mobile. 1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. A couple lines open for you at 1-800-585-9396. Next up is Peggy. She's in Gainesville, Georgia, listening on Totus Tuus Radio. Peggy, you're on with Barbara McGuigan.
Hi, Peggy.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I wanted, there's actually two, well, since I've been listening when you were talking about the body filling with fluid as far as, not being able to, in my opinion, I just went through this with my husband, but I do have another pro-life question about voting. But when you said if anyone has an opinion on this, I did just go through that with my husband. He had congestive heart, and his body was full of fluid, and he was actually, what we call leaking from so much fluid, coming out on his legs and so forth. And I was trying to give him, I was trying to give him something to drink, something to chop up a pill into pudding or Jello, or I can't remember now what. But in fact, these were the last words he said to me. And I said, Preston, you have to take this. And he said, Peggy, I can't. And those were the only three words, he said to me within 2 or 3 days. And so he was shutting down, and he actually could not take it by mouth. But if someone is taking fluid, that's a whole different story. Then you don't stop giving them fluid if they're able to take it. Because if they're not able to take it, they won't. I mean, they can't. He could not.
Yes. And that's what I meant earlier when some people want to refuse. They don't want any food or water when they're in the dying process.
Exactly. And when he was on, they did have breathing tube, and we just watched his numbers all day long. The numbers were just going down, and all the functions. And then all of a sudden there's, because I wanted to be on the same page. I wanted me, my husband, and God to be on the same page with the decision that day. And finally there was for blood oxygen, there was a question mark. And I said, why is there a question mark instead of a percentage? And they said, because he isn't getting any blood to his brain. And that was it. That was the final decision. I said, please just take everything off, because if he wasn't getting blood supply to his brain, he was dying. And so they took everything off then, and he breathed for maybe 5 minutes, and then he died on his own. He died, but I just wanted to say, like you had said, and I just know this for a fact, if they can't take fluid, then they won't.
Right.
If they can take fluid, then you got to keep them alive.
Yes.
They're alive.
Of course.
They're alive. I mean,
and even if they're comatose to us, because I remember my dad kind of slipped in and out of a comatose state, God is still working with them. God can still communicate with them. My dad kept putting both of his arms up like, take me. And I have a feeling the Blessed Mother, I know he saw someone because his eyes would just light up. So,
Yeah.
You're right, dear heart. And you know what? I praise God for you that, you want to do God's will. You want to do this. And because you see that suffering is not meaningless. I mean, I'm sure maybe not physical suffering that he was going through, but possibly mental suffering. But it's the heat that melts us into Christ. That's what, and maybe that's the tiniest little bit of suffering that God was permitting him to go through in order to take him straight up.
And see, my husband, thanks to Terry Scheibel, my husband and I mean, we had talked about that instead of, the living will, we had talked about the will to live. And so I knew what he wanted. I mean, you have to try everything to keep them alive, but when it's time, it's time.
It's time. And you have to be willing to let them go too, don't you?
Yeah.
And God's grace is sufficient to do that. It's sufficient. Not to say it's not painful, but it's sufficient. It will get us through.
But
God love you.
Too, what I wanted to say, can I say this about freedom or voting your conscience when it comes to life? What is the point of? I know who's going to win or, has a whole lot better chance of winning. But, like in Georgia Right to Life, they've endorsed a candidate that is completely pro-life. I mean, capital punishment, everything. He's completely pro-life. Now, he stands, my husband always said, a snowball chance in hell of winning. But, he is pro-life. And so, to vote your conscience for someone that stands there and another candidate stands there and says that Planned Parenthood does good work. I mean, he said that on March 1st, 2016. Yeah. So who can, to vote my conscience, I can't stand there. I can't vote for someone that says just because.
Well, that goes way back, though. Peggy, that goes way back when he made, are you talking about when he made that comment back in March? He's come a long way, baby. He's come a long way. He has surrounded himself with Catholic pro-lifers. His campaign manager is a Catholic pro-lifer. So the whole thing is, I hear what you're saying, and I get it. I cringed when I heard that. But he's come a long way. He did not have the knowledge that he needed about Planned Parenthood. And now he even says until they stop committing abortions, he doesn't want to have any funding going to them. Did you hear that?
And the other night when he was interviewed on EWTN, he never even brought up Planned Parenthood. I mean, wouldn't that have been a golden opportunity to bring it up?
I think it was a great interview, Peggy. I think it was a great interview. They can't cover everything in, 20 minutes, half hour. I don't know how long the interview was. Do you, Jack? But he did say, he talked all about the Supreme Court. See, this speaks volumes. His list for the Supreme Court was chosen by pro-lifers, Citizens for Life. What's that other group? Susan B. Anthony. He had a whole, like I say, look at who's around him. He has come a long way. It's not as painful to think about it as it was in the very, very beginning. And I'm going to have to let you go, dear lady. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right. God bless you. Thank you for calling.
Next up is Paul in Dallas, Texas, listening to Guadalupe Radio. Paul, you're on with Barbara McGuigan.
Hey,
yes,
Paul.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. Yeah,
Good
I have a daughter-in-law that has an ectopic pregnancy, and she needs some guidance on the health ramifications of that and what she should do vis-a-vis the church's teachings.
Well, again, if the baby cannot grow in the fallopian tube. Obviously, there's a blockage there, and the baby 7 to 9 days after his or her conception, the next job is to implant into the wall of the uterus, nidation, right? So when the baby is prevented from doing this, the baby would grow in the tube. No child can survive in the tube because it's a small tube and it'll burst. And then the mother is in real danger. So the act of removing a diseased or injured, or we could say even blocked fallopian tube is not a bad thing. It's a good thing in itself. And the good effect of saving the mother's life is not obtained by the evil effect of the unborn baby's death, see, but by the removal of the diseased or injured fallopian tube. So it's the intent here is not to kill the baby, but to save the mother's life. The baby can't grow and live in the tube, and if it bursts, the mother risks a great chance of losing her life. See what I mean?
Yeah, but she's always been taught that the health of the mother is not one of the criteria for aborting a baby.
Well, it is. You're right. It is. But you see, you have to look at the baby itself. The baby can't grow in the tube. Now, I remember Dr. Nathanson saying one time, if we could just remove the baby from the tube and implant it in the wall of the uterus, if that was a possibility, then that would be the answer, right? That could be the answer. But so far, this hasn't been an option. So, the intent is what you're looking at here, okay?
Thank you,
Should
Paul.
I argue this on a health basis or an ensoulment basis?
On a health basis or an ensoulment basis? Well, now that's a whole complete other issue. But I think that you would look at this one because we believe that God implants the soul. Why would he not? When he gives the child, at conception, all the DNA, everything that he needs is right there. So, that's one way to look at it. It would all be there. The baby can't grow there. Does that make sense? The baby cannot grow in a fallopian tube. The baby would die, in other words.
Thanks so much, Paul. Appreciate the phone call. We will keep you and your daughter in our prayers.
Absolutely.
Barbara, great job as usual. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Thank you so much, Jack.
On behalf of our hostess, Barbara McGuigan, our producer, Michael McCall, call screener, Rich Jesse, I'm Jack Williams. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your Tuesday to join us here on EWTN's Open Line. We'll be back at it again tomorrow. Father Mitch Pack will be in the house talking church teaching, ancient languages, canon law, and the like. So if you've got a question for Father Mitch, get in early. It will be busy most of the hour tomorrow. Until we get together then with Father Mitch, God bless.